The rain lashed against the windshield like a restless tide, a low rhythmic drumming that filled the silence as Nathan Cole pulled his battered Honda into the cracked lot of the Golden Fork Buffet. The car creaked to a halt, and he sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, eyes locked on the building that once symbolized his triumph. The neon sign buzzed weakly overhead, casting a flickering orange haze across rain-slicked pavement, its glow fractured in pools of water like the fragmented memories surfacing in Nathan's mind. This wasn't the place he remembered, not even close. He reached up, adjusting the brim of his frayed baseball cap, and glanced at himself in the rearview mirror. Gone was the sharp suit and the polished image that accompanied the name Nathan Cole, CEO. In its place stood a man cloaked in humility, a faded flannel shirt, jeans frayed at the knees, and a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there 15 years ago when he'd opened this very location with boundless optimism. Tonight he wasn't a corporate leader reviewing numbers from behind a desk. Tonight he was no one, just another face in the crowd looking for a cheap meal. But that was the point. The transformation hadn't been impulsive. It took weeks to prepare. Weeks of deliberately distancing himself from the sterile charts and manicured narratives his regional managers delivered. On paper, everything looked fine. Steady profits, minimal customer complaints, employee turnover within acceptable ranges. But Nathan had a sixth sense for things unseen, and something about this place, it had started whispering wrongness to him, tugging at the edges of his conscience. This buffet was supposed to be the crown jewel, the birthplace of his empire. He had opened it with his own hands, picked the tiles, laid the foundation. Now, according to recent data, it was barely treading water, nothing more than an average performer. That word, average, additive like rust. The parking lot spoke louder than spreadsheets ever could. Half the spaces sat empty despite it being prime dinner time on a Friday. The few cars present were as weary as the man driving them. A rusted shopping cart leaned drunkenly near the entrance, one wheel spinning in the wind, as if unsure which direction to fall. Nathan pushed open the glass doors and stepped inside. Instantly, the air shifted. Grease, bleach, and something heavier, almost mournful, filled his lungs. The once luxurious burgundy carpet was now a patchwork of dull browns and suspicious stains. The hostess stand, a symbol of welcome in its prime, stood deserted. A handwritten sign taped crookedly to the podium read, "Seat yourself." He dropped a crumpled bill into the cash drawer handed by a teenage girl behind thick, bulletproof glass. Her nails clicked on her phone screen as she barely glanced up, a ghost in a forgotten dream. Nathan made his way into the dining area and settled into a booth tucked into the corner, a perfect vantage point to observe the pulse, or lack thereof, of the restaurant. The buffet line stretched out before him like a forgotten battlefield. Half-empty trays glistened under aging heat lamps, their light creating more shadows than warmth. Fingerprints marred the sneeze guard, and several serving spoons lay abandoned on the ground like fallen soldiers. It wasn't just neglect, it was surrender. He reached for his phone to make notes, his brow furrowing when a sudden commotion near the buffet caught his ear. A young woman, maybe in her early 20s, stood with trembling hands, placing small, careful portions onto her plate. Her movements were delicate, almost sacred, like someone assembling a meal not just for nourishment but out of deep need. She was painfully thin, her skin hugging bone. Her clothes hung loosely, and yet she wore a Golden Fork polo. The old design. The logo had been retired years ago. The fabric, once navy, was faded to a sad gray, stained with time and toil. No name tag, frayed black pants. Nathan's chest tightened. Something wasn't right. Before he could piece it together, a voice cracked through the air like a whip. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" A woman in a pressed manager's shirt stormed toward the buffet. Her heels struck the tile with militant precision. The name tag read Sandra, floor supervisor, but her face bore the certainty of someone who believed she was judge, jury, and executioner. The young woman froze mid-motion, her fork hovering over a tray of green beans. Fear radiated from her like a shiver through cold steel. "I asked you a question," Sandra snapped, loud enough to hush conversations around the room. "You gonna pay for that food, or are you just here to steal again?" "I have money," the girl whispered, fumbling in her pocket, fingers trembling with a quiet desperation. Sandra laughed, a hard, sharp sound without a hint of humor. "Sure you do, just like last week, and the week before that, right when security had to drag you out." She turned to the crowd, gesturing like a ringmaster in a cruel circus. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when we go soft. Give them an inch, they take a mile." Nathan felt something in him fracture. The girl's face had drained of color. She was retreating, still clutching her plate, her lips pressed together so tightly it looked like pain. And in that moment, the rain outside wasn't the only thing that felt cold. The place he'd once built to feed and nourish had become something else, something that could shame a starving girl in front of strangers. And Nathan knew. It was time to remember who he really was. Her voice was barely audible, brittle and weighted with shame. "I can pay," the girl murmured, fingers trembling as she reached into her pocket. Sandra's eyes narrowed, her voice climbing in pitch with every word. "Oh, you can pay, ah? With what? Food stamps? Spare change you scraped from under a vending machine?" Her voice oozed with venom as she took a step closer, her tone now sharp enough to cut. "Look at you. Look at that filthy excuse for a uniform. Do you really think pretending to be one of us entitles you to free food?" Kayla flinched at every word. The room was growing quiet again, the clinking of cutlery slowing as eyes turned toward the unfolding scene. Sandra's tirade filled the air like static, grating and cruel. "This isn't a soup kitchen, sweetheart. It's a business. You want pity, go find it in the gutter." Nathan's hands curled into fists beneath the table. Kayla's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she didn't speak again. Instead, she gently set her plate on a nearby table, her movements slow and deliberate, as if every ounce of pride she had left was tied to not letting it slip from her hands. She turned and walked quickly toward the exit, her shoulders curled inward, her head bowed. The murmurs began almost instantly. Words like vagrant and junkie floated through the air, each one laced with disdain. A few customers shook their heads in disgust, others returned to their meals as if nothing had happened. But Nathan remained still, frozen in his booth. His gaze lingered on the plate Kayla had left behind. The small, perfectly portioned bites, like a child trying not to take too much. Something about all of it screamed familiarity, the way she had moved around the buffet line, the instinctive precision in how she used the utensils, how she knew exactly where things belonged. That old golden fork uniform wasn't a disguise. It was real, worn down and outdated, yes, but genuine, which meant she had been one of his employees. As the rain outside swallowed her figure, Nathan reached for his phone. His fingers moved fast. "Need employee records for Golden Fork location. 1. All terminations in the past 4 years. Flag anyone tied to incident reports." He slid his phone back into his pocket and stood, catching the eye of the older busboy from earlier. The man had watched the scene unfold, discomfort etched across his weathered face. "Excuse me," Nathan said, his voice level. "That girl, do you know her?" The man glanced nervously toward the back office where Sandra had disappeared, then leaned closer. "Her name's Kayla. Used to work here. Sweet kid. Worked harder than anyone else." His voice softened, tinged with something that sounded like guilt. "Then she just vanished. Management said she quit, but..." His words trailed off. He didn't need to finish. Nathan exhaled, a low, controlled breath. The gears in his mind were turning fast now. She doesn't look like someone who quit and moved on. No, the man said, his voice now barely a whisper. People don't usually quit and come back to beg for food, not unless something went real wrong. The man returned to his cart of dishes and quietly shuffled away. Nathan turned back toward the rain-speckled window. Outside, Kayla had vanished into the storm, and something inside him, something deep and foundational, began to crack. This was no longer about poor management or falling standards. This was betrayal of everything Golden Fork was meant to be. He couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, pale, exhausted, humiliated. By 6 o'clock a.m., he was already dressed and heading back to the restaurant. This time, he arrived during the breakfast shift, when the atmosphere would be quieter, when different staff might speak more freely. The building looked worse in the morning light, the paint peeling, the windows streaked with grime. Inside, he ordered a pastry and coffee from a sleepy cashier, then settled into a booth closer to the kitchen. He watched. The crowd was sparse, retirees chatting quietly, a few laborers grabbing quick bites before their shifts. But Nathan wasn't here for them. He was here for the truth. Then he saw him. The same busboy, Frank, methodically wiping down tables with the same quiet care he'd shown the night before. Nathan waited until he was nearby. "Frank, right?" he asked gently. "I was here last night. You said the girl's name was Kayla." Frank paused, mid-wipe. He glanced toward the kitchen again, then sat down across from Nathan, lowering his voice. "You're not a reporter, are you? I can't lose this job." Nathan shook his head. "Nothing like that, It seemed like she knew this place really well." Frank sighed, the sound heavy with years of unspoken truths. "She did. Been working here 8 years now. Hardest worker I ever saw. Came in early, stayed late. Never complained. She wanted to be a teacher, was saving for college." Nathan leaned forward. "What happened?" Frank's face darkened. "Kitchen accident. Real bad one. Grease spill near the fryer. Been there for weeks. Everyone knew, but management kept saying, 'We'll fix it tomorrow.' She slipped during a rush, cracked her ribs, hit her head." Nathan felt cold. "Was she okay?" "Barely. Concussion, broken ribs, hurt her back pretty bad. Ambulance took her. I visited her in the hospital. She was scared. Not about the pain, about the bills, about missing work. I told her not to worry, that the company would do right." Frank's hands shook slightly. "Biden didn't." He looked up, shame filling his eyes. "Brent, the manager, he visited her. Not to help. He fired her. Said she caused the accident by being careless. Said she violated safety policy. But that's a lie. And the spill, Brent claimed it never existed. Filed a report saying Kayla was running, being reckless." Nathan's jaw clenched. His empire, his dream, was rotting from within. "And that's not all," Frank added. "They flagged her in the system. Sandra bragged about it once. Said anyone who caused trouble would be blacklisted from every Golden Fork in the chain." Nathan felt nauseous. This wasn't just incompetence, it was systemic cruelty. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, voice low. "You said you couldn't afford to lose your job." Frank looked down, then slowly raised his eyes. "Because I saw what they did to her last night, and I couldn't stay quiet anymore. She used to bring me soup when I was sick, took my shifts when my wife was in the hospital. She's a good person, and we left her behind." He blinked, tears catching in the corners of his tired eyes. "She still wears that uniform, you know. Probably the only decent clothes she owns." Nathan's throat tightened. "She comes back, not to steal, always tries to pay. I think she's hoping someone will remember her, hoping someone will care." Wordlessly, Nathan pulled out his phone and showed Frank a photo from the company directory. "Have you ever seen this man?" Frank squinted. "No. Should I?" "That's Nathan Cole," he said softly. "He owns this entire company." Frank's eyes widened. "The big boss? I thought he was just some rich guy who—" Nathan met his gaze. "I am." And for the first time in years, he truly felt the weight of those words. Frank's voice was low and bitter. "Bought us out years ago. Never seen him around here, not once. Not since the takeover." He gave a hollow chuckle, then added with sharp irony, "Maybe he ought to stop by sometime. Might be interested to know what his managers are doing to the people wearing his name." Nathan didn't respond. He slipped his phone into his pocket, his mind spiraling. The weight of what he was uncovering pressed against his chest like a boulder. It wasn't just poor oversight or the decay of values. It was deeper, rotten to the core. "Frank," he said carefully, "I need to ask you something important. Do you know where Kayla's staying?" Frank's eyes darted around the dining room, caution taking over his tired expression. Then he nodded, reluctantly. "There's a shelter about 6 blocks down, Haven House. She's been in and out of there the past few months. But why? Who are you really?" Before Nathan could answer, Sandra's voice cut through the air like a slap. "Frank, what are you doing talking to customers? Those tables aren't going to clean themselves." Frank startled, instinctively grabbing his rag and spray bottle. As he backed away, he leaned close to Nathan one last time. "Be careful who you trust," he whispered. "And if you're serious about helping Kayla, you'd better move fast. I heard Sandra talking about having her arrested next time she steps through those doors." And just like that, Frank disappeared into the kitchen. Nathan remained seated, unmoving, his thoughts racing like a thunderstorm. Then, almost mechanically, he pulled out his phone and dialed his head of security. As he waited for the call to connect, his eyes drifted to the window. Somewhere out there, in the haze of that gray morning, a young woman who once wore his company's uniform was probably waking up in a cold cot, still clinging to the hope that someone, anyone, might believe her story. Someone might care. The call clicked through. "Jim, it's Nathan. I need everything you can dig up on a former employee named Kayla. Location number 1. Prioritize anyone involved in workplace incidents. And Jim..." He paused, the gravity of the moment settling over him. "This one's urgent. Her life might depend on it." Hours later, Nathan sat alone in his car, parked outside the Haven House shelter. The afternoon sun hung warm above the city, but he felt none of it. His hands were clammy, his heart heavy. He stared at the shelter's brick facade, steeling himself to go inside, to see the damage up close. At exactly 2:47 p.m., his phone buzzed. "Jim Morrison." Nathan answered. "You're not going to like what I found," Jim said, his voice tight. Nathan's heart clenched. "Go on." "Or more accurately," Jim continued, "what I didn't find. There's no employee record for any Kayla at Location 1. No payroll, no termination report, nothing. According to the system, she never existed." "That's impossible," Nathan said, the disbelief sharp in his voice. "Frank remembers her. She worked there for months." "I thought the same," James said. "So I made some calls. I reached out to Linda Martinez. She was in HR at the regional office before retiring last year. She remembers Kayla. But Nathan, you need to sit down." Nathan gripped the steering wheel tighter. "According to Linda, there was a Kayla Williams. She was involved in a serious accident at your original location about 8 months ago. But the official report says she died. Complications from her injuries. Death certificate filed, benefits paid, case closed." The words hit Nathan like a punch to the chest. "She died?" he echoed, his voice barely more than a whisper. "No. I saw her. I spoke to someone who knew her. She's alive." "Then someone forged her death," Jim replied. "Linda always thought something was off," said. Brent Harper, the manager, pushed everything through fast, claimed the family couldn't handle the paperwork. "But, Nathan, there's more." Nathan felt the tension in his body spike. Brent's been living like a king. New car, Vegas vacations, paid off his mortgage in 1 year. I pulled his financials. The timing lines up with the supposed death. "Insurance fraud," Nathan muttered. "Worse," Jim said. "The bonus he received came from the company's insurance savings account. And he wasn't the only one. The regional managers signed off on the death certificate, traced kickbacks to at least 3 other corporate employees." Nathan leaned back in his seat, the warm sunlight unable to cut through the storm cloud now swirling inside him. His empire, the one he'd built on integrity, on fairness, had become a cover for organized fraud. Jim set up a meeting with Linda Martinez. "Today, discreet. I don't want anyone else at corporate catching wind of this." "She's already agreed. Starbucks on 5th, 4 p.m. Nathan nodded, already turning the keys in the ignition. "And Jim," he added, voice like iron, "I want a list of names. Every single person involved. We're bringing in lawyers, investigators. If we need to go to the feds, we will." An hour later, Nathan sat across from Linda Martinez. The coffee shop buzzed with casual conversation, but their corner booth felt isolated, an island of secrets. Linda looked older than he remembered, her hair silvering, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. "I should have said something back then," she murmured, "but I was a year from retirement, and Brent, he made it clear it'd be bad for my health if I asked too many questions." "Tell me everything." Linda nodded. "Kayla was one of the good ones, always working doubles, helping cover shifts, no complaints. Then the accident happened. I started filing the workers' comp like usual, but Brent showed up out of nowhere with a death certificate. Said it all came from the hospital, that the family didn't want to deal with the paperwork." "Did you verify it?" "No," Linda admitted, shame in her voice. "I should have, but everything was so clean. Too clean. Forms signed, program printed, payout processed, and the money. Nathan, it was nearly $200,000, 0 cents. For a part-time worker, that should have raised every red flag we had." Nathan leaned forward. "Who else?" Regional Manager Dave Thompson approved everything. Sarah Chin in claims processed it, and someone in accounting authorized the bonuses. She reached into her bag and pulled out a creased folder. "I kept copies. Something about it never sat right. Call it a backup, just in case." Nathan unfolded the papers slowly. It was all there. Dates, amounts, signatures. A perfectly laid out scheme of deceit that stretched far beyond one man's greed. "Linda," he asked quietly, "why are you helping me now?" Her eyes, filled with regret, welled with tears. "Because I heard she's still alive. That she's been seen near the restaurant begging for food. And if that's true, then we didn't just commit fraud. We erased her life. We condemned a young girl to suffer for our silence." Nathan looked down at the documents, each line more damning than the last. And at that moment his phone buzzed again. The truth was unraveling fast, and he had only just begun to uncover the full extent of the betrayal. Nathan's phone buzzed sharply, a single text message flashing across the screen from an unknown number. "Stop digging or the girl disappears permanently. Some stones are better left unturned." He stared at the message, the chill crawling up his spine colder than anything the evening air could deliver. Without a word, he turned the screen toward Linda. Her face went pale, lips parting in horror. "Nathan," she whispered, maybe, you should let this go. these people. If they're willing to fake deaths and steal from their own employees, who knows what else they're capable of? He pocketed the phone with a quiet finality and stood tall, eyes burning with quiet fury. "Because I built this company," he said, his voice steeled with conviction, "on the principle that every person, every single one, deserves dignity, respect, and somewhere along the way, I let that vision rot. But not anymore." He walked out of the Starbucks, leaving the comforting hum of espresso machines and conversation behind, and stepped into the encroaching twilight. His investigation had shifted from corporate negligence to something far more sinister. He wasn't just uncovering a misstep anymore. He was chasing a conspiracy laced with greed, betrayal, and danger. And at the center of it all was Kayla, the girl everyone had written off, discarded, forgotten. But she hadn't vanished. She'd survived, and now her survival could bring the entire house of cards crashing down. That threat. It didn't scare Nathan. It fueled him. By the time night fell, he was back at the original Golden Fork location, hidden in the shadows behind the building. He waited until the restaurant closed, then used his master key to slip in through the back. The interior was eerily silent, bathed only in faint red emergency lights that cast long, distorted shadows across the floors. Every creak echoed like a warning. Nathan crept through the kitchen, heading for the employee storage room, one of the only places that still held physical records. If there was evidence to be found, it would be here. He unlocked the door and slipped inside, the heavy click of the lock behind him making him flinch. Using his phone's flashlight, he scanned the cramped room, its shelves lined with uniforms, cleaning supplies, and dusty old boxes. He began digging through the personnel files. At first, it was standard paperwork, tax forms, schedules, termination notices. But then, a gaping hole. Every file from the period when Kayla worked there, gone, vanished, erased like she never existed. His heart sank, but he pressed on. Behind a stack of cleaning chemicals, he noticed a cardboard box with messy handwriting. Damaged uniforms, disposal pending. The signature was unmistakably Brent's. Inside, Nathan found a dozen or more old Golden Fork uniforms, many stained or ripped, but a few still in good condition. Mixed in with the uniforms were scattered name tags, ID cards, like a mass grave of discarded identity. Then he saw it. A name tag, Kayla W. Beneath it, a hospital bracelet, Kayla Williams. The date was the day of her accident. The air in the room felt colder suddenly, like the past was reaching up through the floorboards to choke him. And then at the bottom of the box, half-burned documents, official papers barely legible under the scorch marks. He gently pulled them out and examined the first, Kayla's original injury report. Her handwriting detailed the grease spill, her fall, her injuries. 3 witness signatures confirmed her account. Then the second document, a copy of the death certificate, but this version revealed the truth. The hospital discharge had been altered with correction fluid. Someone had changed discharged, stable condition to deceased due to complications. Fraud, clear, calculated, and ruthless. Nathan began photographing every document when a sound outside the storage room froze him. The metallic jingle of keys at the front entrance. Someone else was in the building. He crept to the door and peeked through the narrow window. His figures, flashlight slicing through the dark. And then he heard the voice. "Rin Harper." "The boss man's getting too close," Brent muttered. "Linda Martinez met with someone this afternoon. If she talked." "She talked," a woman's voice interrupted. "Sandra." Her tone was sharp, detached. "Dave Thompson called. Said some PI's been poking around the Williams case." Nathan's stomach churned. "This is bad," Sandra said. "Nobody's going to find anything. Brent snapped. Williams is a homeless junkie now. Nobody listens to junkies. And if she causes more problems, well, accidents happen. Nathan's fury boiled just beneath the surface. She's not a junkie, he thought. She's a human being, and you already stole everything from her once. What about the investigator? Sandra asked. Taken care of. Dave's got connections. Sometimes nosy people disappear. Nathan scanned the room, looking for an escape. There was only one door. When footsteps. Check the employee areas, Brent ordered. If someone's been snooping, we'll find evidence. The handle of the storage room began to turn. Nathan's pulse spiked. He gripped his phone, ready to call 911. What then? Crash! A loud noise erupted from the front of the restaurant, glass shattering, a car alarm blaring into the night. What the hell? Sandra yelled. The footsteps retreated. Nathan heard shouting, Brent cursing as they ran to investigate. He didn't wait. He bolted out of the storage room, hugging the shadows as he made for the back door. The evidence burned against his chest. The hospital bracelet, the fake certificate, the statement with real signatures. He slipped into the night as Brent and Sandra argued about a rogue shopping cart that had apparently rolled into a parked car. Nathan didn't stop running until he reached his car. He pulled out his phone. Jim, he said breathlessly, get the feds. Tonight. This isn't just fraud, it's criminal conspiracy, attempted murder, cover-up, everything. That night he barely slept. His apartment transformed into a command center. Papers spread across every surface, his laptop blinking with spreadsheets, emails, photos. Calls came in constantly. Lawyers, federal investigators, and updates from Jim. At 7:00 a.m., there was a knock. Agent Sarah Chin from the FBI's white-collar crimes unit stepped inside. Her face was hard, determined. We found her, she said, setting down a thick file. Kayla Williams is alive. We picked her up 2 hours ago. She's at a secure location now. Nathan's shoulders dropped. The breath he'd been holding finally released. Is she okay? She's alive, Agent Chin said. But she's malnourished, suffering from severe emotional trauma. She's been gaslit for 8 months, told she didn't exist, that no one would ever believe her. I need to see her. Not yet. She's with our victim advocates right now, but she gave a statement. Everything you uncovered, she confirmed it. Agent Chin opened her folder, and she told us something else, something new. Nathan's breath caught. There have been at least 3 other employees, she said, over the last 2 years. Young, part-time, no family, all injured, all disappeared, all erased from company records. The room seemed to spin around him, a slow-motion realization crushing down. This wasn't about one girl. This was a pattern, a machine. And now it was his job to dismantle it. For Kayla, for all of them, for the company he once dreamed would stand for something better. The scope of the conspiracy was deeper, darker, and more devastating than Nathan had ever dared imagine. As Agent Chin laid out the facts, his hands trembled against the polished glass of his office window, his eyes scanning the skyline of a city that now felt tainted by the shadow cast by his own company. Where are they now? He asked quietly, voice thick with dread. Chin's expression hardened. One of them is in a psychiatric facility out of state. Total mental collapse after months of being gaslit. Another fled across the country, too terrified to speak. The third. He paused. We're still looking. Nathan turned away from the window, his jaw clenched. His restaurants, places meant to nourish, had become breeding grounds for predatory cruelty, cloaked in the colors of a brand he once believed in. He exhaled, low and determined. Chin, he said, I want this to end. Today. She raised an eyebrow. We need more time to build a case. No, he said, sharper now. Every hour we wait is another hour these people walk free. We're not waiting anymore. We're going to force their hand. 2 hours later, the front doors of Golden Fork's original location swung open, and this time Nathan didn't walk in alone. He moved with purpose, dressed in his finest suit. By his side were Agent Chin, 2 federal officers, Jim Morrison, and his lead corporate attorney. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Lunch traffic slowed to a whisper. Forks hovered midair. Conversations stilled. Nathan stepped into the center of the dining room and raised his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? My name is Nathan Cole. I am the owner of Golden Fork Enterprises. Gasps rippled through the crowd. All eyes turned to him. From the kitchen, Brant Harper stumbled into view. The color drained from his face. Sandra emerged behind him, stunned as if she'd seen a ghost. Mr. Harper, Nathan called, his voice clear and cutting. I believe we need to have a conversation about employee safety and insurance fraud. Brent tried to keep composure, lips twitching. Sir, I don't know what you've heard, but... Nathan raised a hand. The misunderstanding, he said coldly, is thinking you could steal from this company, destroy lives, and never face consequences. He gestured to Agent Chin. This is FBI Agent Chin. She's here to arrest you for conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. A gasp swept through the dining room. Phones were out. People were filming. Sandra began inching toward the kitchen exit, but 2 more agents stepped into her path, blocking escape. You can't prove anything, Brent snapped, desperation cracking his voice. It's your word against mine. Nathan didn't flinch. He connected his phone to the restaurant's speaker system. Brant's voice boomed from the night before, chilling and unmistakable. Nobody's going to find out anything. Williams is a homeless junkie. If she becomes a problem, well, accidents happen. The crowd reacted viscerally. Chairs scraped back. Customers shook their heads, disgust and horror clear on every face. Nathan continued, lifting a tablet that displayed images of Kayla's falsified death certificate. This, he said, is proof you declared a living woman dead to steal $200,000, 0 cents. Brent lunged forward. You don't get it. Dave Thompson authorized everything. We were following orders. Nathan turned calmly toward the entrance. But here he is now. Dave Thompson entered, hands cuffed behind his back, flanked by agents. Mr. Thompson has been very cooperative, Agent Chin added. He gave us records, emails, and names. This goes all the way to the top. The staff froze, realizing the entire illusion was shattering. Frank, the old busboy, stepped into view from the kitchen, his eyes glassy. Nathan climbed onto a chair, commanding the room. To our customers and to every honest employee, we failed you, he said. This company was built on dignity. Today that begins again. He held up a large photograph, a younger Kayla in a Golden Fork uniform, smiling proudly. This is Kayla Williams. She was injured because of our negligence, then erased to hide that negligence. But today, she gets her life back. As agents led Brent and Sandra away, Nathan turned to the remaining employees. This location is closed, effective immediately for investigation and restructuring. Every employee will be paid during the closure. If you knew but were too afraid to speak, you are safe. Your cooperation means immunity. Frank stepped forward, voice shaking. Is Kayla really okay? Nathan looked him in the eye. She's safe, Frank, and tomorrow, I'm asking her to help me rebuild everything. As the restaurant emptied, police tape sealing off the doors, Nathan stood in silence. This was once his proudest dream. It had become his worst nightmare. But now, it was something else. Redemption. 3 months later, he stood outside a small coffee shop in downtown, clutching a folder thick with papers. Inside sat Kayla, wearing clean clothes, her hair tied back, her face softer, fuller. The woman inside was no longer broken, but cautious, wary. Nathan stepped in. She looked up, body tensing. "Miss Williams," he said gently, taking the seat across from her. "Thank you for meeting me." "I was told you wanted to apologize," she said. "You didn't have to." "But I did," he said, "because what happened started with me. I let things rot under my watch." She nodded, silently absorbing every word. "Frank says you made sure all the honest staff kept their jobs," she said. "He still visits me, says you're trying to fix it." Nathan opened the folder. "Kiana," he said, "I don't just want to apologize. I want to make this right." He slid a check across the table. Her eyes widened. "This is your back pay, workers' comp, damages, and medical costs," he said. "You earned every cent." She stared, stunned. "This is more money than I've ever had." "But it's not about the money." He handed over another paper, an offer letter. "I want you to lead our new division, Director of Employee Advocacy and Safety. You'll travel, inspect stores, shut down violations. You report directly to me." Her hands trembled. "You want me to work for Golden Fork?" "I want you to help rebuild it," he said. "Who better to protect employees than someone who's lived through the worst of it?" Kayla's voice cracked. "I still have nightmares. Sometimes I feel invisible again." Nathan reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. "You were never invisible, Kayla. We just failed to see you." He pulled up an article. "Golden Fork passes Kayla's law. Your story is in every break room. Your name stands for justice. We call it the Justice Clause. Whistleblowers now get immediate protection." Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been thinking about school," she whispered. "I always wanted to teach." "Then we'll pay your tuition," he said, "and when you graduate, we'll start a scholarship in your name." For the first time, Kayla smiled, a real, glowing smile. "Well, are you doing all this?" she asked. Nathan paused. "Because I once promised this company would treat every employee like family. I broke that promise. You're giving me a chance to keep it again." Kayla looked down at the offer. "When do I start?" 6 months later, Golden Fork's original location buzzed with new energy. Bright lighting, clean walls, a plaque read, "Dedicated to every worker who deserves to be heard." Kayla stood in front of a room full of new managers, leading training on employee rights. Her voice was strong, her presence magnetic. Frank appeared with coffee. "That girl's gonna change the whole industry," he said with a grin. "She's not just changing the industry," Nathan said, watching her, eyes shining. "She's changing the world, one person at a time." Kayla's laughter echoed through the room. Golden Fork was no longer just a business. It was a promise reborn, a life restored, and a future where no employee would ever be invisible again. The girl who had once been declared dead had brought an entire empire back to life.